coming up in this episode.
And the state of Moscow, it was like something out of a World War II movie.
Women having their stomachs ripped open by Serb soldiers because they bet to see whether the child is a boy or a girl.
Muslim women, they commit suicide or to protect themselves from what was going to happen to them.
They raped her while her child was crying, and she kept on begging them not to to harm the child, that she'll give up to them.
Everybody has the right to defend themselves, but unfortunately you can't defend it if you're a Muslim. There's a lot of people I met there that didn't really make it back.
And he said this is where they crucified one of the foreign Mujahideen.
In this episode, I spoke to my uncle about his time during the Bosnian War, after which I speak to Moazzam Begg about his time in Bosnia. So stay tuned, let's begin. Episode 4.
I've just received a phone call response to an uncle of mine that I want to interview for this project. And he's actually someone that went to Bosnia in the 90s, as far as I know. And I actually went with him to Bosnia when I went with my dad in 2014. I've never really heard his story, so I don't think he's ever told his story to anyone. So this will be like a exclusive. I think it'd be good just to get, obviously I've interviewed younger people, I've interviewed older people, and now it'd be good to actually speak to someone who was there firsthand, what motivated him to go and do that, or to help out. I don't know exactly what happened. And let's see how much information we get. Let's see where this goes. So I'm literally on my way there right now. I'll keep you guys posted. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
I am here with the interview that I mentioned. And obviously a lot of these interviews, they're not scripted, so they're just straight, direct from the heart. So the first question I have for you is, I've covered a lot in terms of like what happened before the communism rule, before that. So this podcast will be like a mix of different things and different stories. But for this part, what I want to get across is a human experience of someone that actually lived during that time. You were young at that time. How old were you?
I was in my late 20s.
Late 20s, yeah. So what was it about what happened in Bosnia during that time that affected you? Or what was the response? How were you living? How were the Muslims around you? And did it have an impact on them? Like what was the situation back then?
Well, in the 90s, I don't think there was many, as you can say, practicing Muslims like myself. So this war in Bosnia was kind of confusing for everybody. No one knew who was Muslim, who was Orthodox, and who was the Christians, because there were so many sides fighting the war. And it took quite a long time for us to realize it was actually the Muslims that were getting the how can you say, being ethnically cleansed. And myself, I used to be away from Islam as well, because I never used to pray. And you're just watching the news day in, day out, same news every time. And because it's Europe, so there was a lot of information all the time regarding this war. But we never knew who the aggressors were and who the victims were till we got like about a year or so in the war.
So we're talking like 1994?
End of 93, beginning of 94, yeah.
And how did it impact you? Like what actually eventually led you to deciding that I'm going to leave home and I'm going to go there and help out, however you helped out?
It's quite a long time ago now. But main issue was, I think, is because certain people were getting oppressed, and watching it day in, day out, you didn't feel comfortable about it. And yourself, obviously your lifestyle in this country is like it's easy for you, everything's around you, and you're watching these people suffering, in all kinds of weather. You didn't really feel too comfortable anymore at home, sitting around watching this news anymore. So thinking that maybe just me who thinks like this, that we need to do something, I need to do something, and you can't do nothing. Personally, on your own, you can't do anything. And what can you do anyway? If you want to do something, how do you get out there? What do you do? It was very, very extremely difficult. And Yeah, and slowly, I think people start talking about it, even in the mosques, and even people gatherings, their friends and everybody. And we start realizing we're not the only ones really thinking about it. Everyone's really concerned, about what's going on out there. And the only reason these people are being targeted is because they had a Muslim name. They weren't really practicing Muslims out there, but they had a name which was linked to Islam. And for that reason, they were being targeted.
So based on that, what was the awakening like amongst the people that are around you? Was it like a group of you that decided that we're going to go and do something about it, we're going to help out however we can? I know a lot of people went for fighting, a lot of people went for charity, different people were coming back and forth. A lot of Muslims from here, a lot of foreign fighters, even I heard from as far as Indonesia, Malaysia, they were coming down to help out as much as they could. What was your story from the UK to Bosnia?
Like I said, we started gathering around, talking, having circles. Yeah, we started to ask questions. What can we do about this? What can we do? And we're helping out. And we decided to really start doing some charity work, take something out there for these people, food, money, whatever we could. And we have never done this before. We've never been in that position. And so we just got a few of us together and arranged a trip over there. Regional trip we went out there. It was up to only Zagreb in Croatia, and we dropped off some food and a vehicle, and then we came back. And when we came back, we started thinking about going even further out into the main area, which was Bosnia itself. And then we found out there's some guys from UK had gone out there already and were back, and we got information from them how it was, how safe it was to get out there and do this charity work. And so we learnt the route from them, really, how to get out there. And a few of us went out there and we started doing these charity trips.
How many times in total did you go over?
3 times. First time was Zagreb, then second time we stayed 3 months in Bosnia itself. And third time I went back again and stayed there for another 3 months or so. The last time we went, it was 3 of us, and one of the guys had to cut short the trip. He came back. He had a situation back in the UK, so he had to come back. And the other brother who went with me he had an accident out there, and he passed away in that country due to that incident. So he's buried out there in Bosnia somewhere.
So all in all, you went there 3 times and you stayed 3 months, and the first time was a shorter trip. What was the impact that it had on you, considering that you mentioned that you were someone that wasn't practicing Islam? What was the impact that what the Muslims over there were going through had on you? And also, can you tell us any stories about what was actually taking place in the conflict?
First of all, as I said, I wasn't really practicing because, firstly, I never knew how to read Salah. Like my dad used to be at me 24/7, and I used to say, yeah, okay, Dad, I'll do it. And by the time I was 26, 27 is when I realized that now it's come to a point where I'm sitting with people who are, mashallah, well versed in Islam, and here's me, I have minimum of knowledge about it at all, about the subject. And I used to, when it was Salah time, I used to make sure I was right at the back so I can copy the people in front of me making the actions, doing the actions. So, because I didn't know, for Maghrib, if how many rakat there was and how to read them actually as well, the actions of it. So this was a great blessing for me. Allah Ta'ala blessed me with this, that, he took me out of something, put me into something that was an eye-opener, you can say, made me realize what reality was for Muslims. And to be a Muslim, what you need to be doing at the same time. So I started learning to read namaz, and my namaz actually I learnt while I was on these trips. So this was a great blessing for me. They brought me back into Islam. And while in Bosnia itself, there's mosque in every corner there, but very rarely any people in them. But as the war was progressing, you would see more and more people coming and getting involved and wanting to know or wanting to learn, just like myself. They wanted to learn from us. Not very good teachers we were, but mashallah, some of the brothers we traveled with, they were very good. Yeah, this is part of the trips, that benefit myself, not just doing the charity work, but, learning how to read namaz myself. And the people that were there, they were traveled from Canada, from America, from Malaysia, from Australia. People were there to help out, from all over the world. And it's another eye opener that you'll see that Muslims are so far apart, and they have the same feeling for their brothers in Islam when it comes to tragedies, when it comes to suffering, and they want to come and help. Not as many as we would like them to be, but there are people out there. So, alhamdulillah, that was a great eye opener for me as well.
So when you were there, what was actually happening? Who was attacking who from what side? Were there, like, I've heard stories of like villages that were surrounded. There was a siege of the main city. Like all of these like stories that were happening. Do you recount any of these stories personally, or stories that people have told you from survivors?
We stayed in a place called Mostar, and I think anybody knows about Bosnia, they'll know the situation in Mostar. It was where the Croats were fighting the Muslims there. Croat and Muslims on one side, and then you got the Serbs and Muslims from the other side. And the state of Mostar, it was like something out of a World War II movie. I don't think there was much left standing there, as in sense of destruction and the killing. As we know, the Muslims were very limited in their resources, especially when Europe had put arms embargo on them as well. Although they were the victims, there was genocide being committed in the country, and still the West actually put embargo. So even if whatever they had to fight back with, they were sharing. For example, if they had a rifle, there would be 3 or 4 people sharing that rifle. It's not like it would be like one each, like you would have normally. So they were really underdogs, and that's how they were treated actually by Europe as well. Because Europe, as they said, they didn't want anything Islamic country in Europe at that time. Yeah, so the Muslims were really battered from every direction because they had no help from outside.
Are there any stories that you feel like young Muslims today, they don't know that this actually happened in Europe? Like they're just looking at it as maybe it was just like a very quick war, it was an in and out, or are there like any stories that you recount of like serious things happening during that time?
I think youngsters are aware of that war. From the information that's on the media, and especially what's going on today in Gaza, they will hear stories about what happened to Muslims in Bosnia, and it should really teach them that inform them in the sense that it could happen to them anytime, anywhere. So it's not that they're safe just because they're living in the West is hunky-dory here, no. That's what the Bosnians thought, they were safe there as well. Other than that, it's happened in Bosnia. I mean, how women were being raped, or their stomachs split open just to see if it's a male or a female baby. The Serbs especially, they would put a bet on bet with each other to see who's right, whether if they split the baby stomach open, would it be a boy or a girl. That's how they played with the Muslim women. A lot of Muslim women, they committed suicide or to protect themselves from what was going to happen to them. And we all know the genocide that took place and other places as well, where 7,000 men and boys were executed. But tortures were happening everywhere, all over the place. Wherever the Serbs went, they just run amok like barbarians. Yeah, a lot of bad things happened there, and it was not a short war. It wasn't just like a scuffle between a couple of villages or something. It was quite a major war, and thousands and people died and injured and suffered a lot. And it took over 2 years, or maybe even longer than that actually, to finally come to a halt.
How did the war come to an end, and
do you feel like according to some analysts, that they're saying that there could be in the future another breakout in that region because they don't feel like things are completely settled. Just like how they had the policy of brotherhood before the war, and they started intermarrying and they started being one. Things really turned on them quickly in the past, and is it possible for things to kind of turn quickly on the Muslims again in the future?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that the situation there at the moment, because the situation there again is becoming very fertile again for especially Serbia to create another mess again, and the Muslims again, they've not as gone far as practicing their religion. They've fallen back into Western ideology, Western culture, Western everything that is going against Islam most of the time, and so they really how they were treated by the Serbs and the Croatian. Both Christian, and one is Orthodox, one is Catholic, and the whole purpose for them was to annihilate these Muslims from here. And if they haven't learned from what happened to them, and it's not so long ago, just 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and it's all fresh still. And if they haven't learned anything from that, it looks like it's going to be revisited because the situation is not changed.
Before we conclude the interview, is there any other stories that you felt like they were powerful or that you're recounting now that might be worth sharing?
All I can say, you need to be prepared for the worst. You need to be aware of it. For personally, mostly is that how the brotherhood works. It's not that we became aware of this situation only because it was Muslims. It was because it was happening to humans. It wasn't just as I said, it was happening to Muslims, but it wasn't just solely because they were Muslim. We wanted help. I mean, if there's tragedy like this anywhere in the world, we want to help. We can, alleviate the suffering of people anywhere we can, wherever religion, whatever background they are. It doesn't really matter. So this brotherhood that we, found is amazing. Everybody just wanted to help, but nobody was looking for help at the same time. Like we live our lives here, and we are just thinking about me, myself, and I. Very selfish as we are here. But I found that if you get into a crowd like that, it can be very beneficial for yourself and rest of the youngsters especially. They need to be with a good company, and this is the best thing happened to me was my company changed, and I changed. Because if I stayed in the company I would have, Allah knows best where I would have been at the moment. We wouldn't be talking about this situation. Yeah, and like I said, my friend who passed away there, so his family, everybody, he was the light of their eyes, coolness of their eyes. I see how they, put up with his sacrifice. So when you see things like that, brothers giving their, the life for, helping others, that make you think twice of doing something that is, not pleasing to Allah Ta'ala.
Can you think of any stories here that shocked you in terms of what people were willing to give up when it came to giving charity and stuff? And could you also think of any stories that happened when you were there in terms of you're seeing people, them being attacked, or they're coming to retreat and you're trying to help people, or when you're distributing aid?
All I can say is the brother I'm talking about, he was here, and because he had seen me go then come back, and he was always after me saying, look, can you take me with you next time you go? He was quite young. He was in his, I think he was 20, 21. He was going to uni. Very, very smart, intelligent boy. And he's the one who's kept contacting me, telling me, look, I want to get out of here. I want to go and do something. I want to help. I don't want to go to university anymore. I can do that when I come back. I can, And his parents obviously asked him not to go anywhere with me. But he was so adamant, and he just wanted to get out. That's all it was. I can remember him saying, I want to get out of this And yeah, he got out of it. He got out of this altogether. He left me behind. Yeah, he left us behind. He was very quick. He went out there and he was gone. So it was that's how quick it was. Yeah, there were a lot of people who made sacrifices. There are a lot of people I met there that didn't really make it back. Some ended up staying, joining the Bosnian army, in their units and that. And yeah, a lot of them, they stay with them, and they never really made it back. A lot of them were shaheed there. A lot of them. There's quite a few brothers from UK as well that went missing in action as well. Yeah, just that we don't hear about them. It's like nothing's really happened. Yeah, I think maybe we're just afraid to talk about these things.
What they done was they defended Muslims. You get it? It's like one of the most honourable things to do. It would be good to, I don't know if I will throughout this whole project, but actually try get stories of those people.
Defending Muslims nowadays you have different tags, labels, and because you're defending somebody. Everybody has a right to defend themselves, but unfortunately, you can't defend if you're a Muslim. So it's kind of crazy that
It's true. I hope that inshallah this will serve as something that the next generation can go back to, and to just like kind of recount these stories. Jazakallah khair for your time.
I want to thank my uncle for his time in speaking to me. Although he has many more stories to tell, he's never really spoken to anyone about his time in Bosnia before. But perhaps I can convince him, maybe, one day, to write a book about it. But anyhow, let's continue the journey.
You know what, while I'm at it, big shout out to H. Rahman. You know who you are. Jazakallah khair for helping me get this new wire, because the previous wire was causing me problems. I had to connect it to another adapter, and sometimes through the interview I would just hear crackling noises and I'd have to repeat stuff. And I'm doing this project like possibly during a very difficult financial period due to other commitments that I'm currently undertaking. So alhamdulillah, yeah, jazakallah khair. People's smallest contributions go a long way, and inshallah everyone's contributions towards this project, even with your either whether you're sharing it, will act inshallah as a sadaqah jariyah if it benefits the ummah. This morning we're in London. It's 9 a.m. in the morning. We're on our way to central London to meet with Moazzam Begg, someone who I've been looking forward to interview for this whole project. We tried to make it happen in Birmingham. He was away, and now that he's here visiting London, we're going to make it happen inshallah. I don't think he needs a huge introduction, but what we know him for is not Bosnia. I mean, we know he's very known for his stories on Guantanamo Bay. He's known for the work that he does at Cage International as one of the directors. And I think maybe this is a part of his story that is less known. It's definitely known by people, but maybe it's less known to the wider public. So as far as I understand, Moazzam is someone who went to Bosnia in the 90s, so he would have stories to tell. And that's what this project's about. It's about human stories. I'm not interested in interviewing doctors and academics per se. I'm very much interested in the human stories for the next generation, so that they can connect with something, a story that's related to our ummah. And when you interview one person, it leads on to the next, and another person gets recommended, and another person gets recommended, and more project ideas come. I was thinking of starting a project on Afghanistan, but I don't know what part of Afghanistan to focus on. People are always talking about doing a project on Palestine. I feel like there's a lot out there, and I want to cover stuff that's maybe not so known, like Bosnia. I want to cover the French colonialism in Algeria. I want to study, rather I want to present and do interviews on stuff like that, Burma. Let's see inshallah where this goes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant me tawfiq to execute all of these projects that I have in my head. Anyhow, the next voice you shall hear possibly will be mine, but then also Moazzam Begg's. Let's begin. I'm currently on my way there right now, driving fashionably late.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. So today we are with, as mentioned before, with Moazzam Begg. The first question I have for you is regarding Bosnia and the 90s in particular, or even if you want to go before that, what was the background of the country from what you understood at the time, or maybe what you understood later, and how did things develop into what happened in the 90s?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Moazzam Begg. I'm the Senior Director at Cage, former prisoner of Guantanamo, and author of Enemy Combatant. In Bosnia in the 90s, it's really important that we understand the backdrop, because it really, just as much as we know it to be Bosnia now, when I was growing up, it was known as Yugoslavia, or the Republic of Yugoslavia. And that was made up of 4 different republics, which eventually sought separation or became separate from the main republic, which was that of Serbia, or Republika Srpska. And you eventually had Bosnia and Herzegovina, you had Croatia, you had Slovenia, and of course Serbia. The difference between all of these little states was that each one had its own majority population, except for Bosnia. Bosnia was made up of Bosnian Muslims, Bosnian Croats, and Bosnian Serbs. When conflict occurred, the Bosnian Croats could always seek shelter and support from Croatia. The Bosnian Serbs could seek shelter and support from Serbia. The Muslims had no one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the backdrop is important, because Yugoslavia was, after World War II, taken over by a man called Marshal Tito, who was essentially had his own version of communism, but that, for better or for worse, kept the country united in essentially no faith, or the expression of faith being curtailed. Mosques were often closed, and the practice of religion was extremely basic. People would call themselves Muslim by name, but not by religion. And the status remained until, of course, the fall of the Soviet Union is really important, because the Soviet Union was the backdrop. It was the main, you could say, mainstay that supported any of the communist nations around at that time. And their defeat happened directly as a result. The breakup of the USSR happened directly as a result of the defeat of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan by Mujahideen forces. And slowly after that, all of those Eastern European states started to crumble, particularly those that were connected to Russia, like Moldova, Estonia, Lithuania, and beyond. And so when we look at Yugoslavia, though it wasn't part of those particular states of Russia, it was a communist state. And when Slovenia declared independence, and then Croatia afterwards, the Serb majority that were where the base of the Yugoslav army was based, attacked these places to try to force them to remain into what they believed to be Yugoslavia. And so the Yugoslavia then started to separate, disintegrate as a country, and all these different states declared independence. Amongst those places, Bosnia and Herzegovina became the most volatile, and where the most destruction took place. And most people, including myself, had no idea that there was a Muslim population, an indigenous, white, Slavic Muslim population in the heart of Europe.
And from the 90s, and while this was happening, what was going on over here with you guys? And what were the stories that you were hearing? And what kind of prompted there to be some kind of response from the Muslims in the rest of Europe?
Yeah, so I remember from myself, I'd started to read, and information didn't pass through the way that it does now, almost instantly on your fingertips on the phone. We'd have to see mainstream media. So at that time, there was 3 or 4 terrestrial channels on television. That was BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4. That was it. And that's where we got our news from, other than newspapers. And every now and then, people coming back with reports. So there was one brother from Leicester, I remember, he made a video after going to Bosnia, and it was in around, I think, 92. It was called Massacres in Bosnia and Croatia. And when I saw this video, I remember the way that it happened in those days, make a video and just copy the videotape. And it would be, you'd go home and put it in your VCR recorder and watch it. Or there'd be screenings in different places. And it was shocking. It was really shocking. It was uncut, unedited, raw footage of women having their stomachs ripped open by Serb soldiers because they bet to see whether the child is a boy or a girl. Children with their throats slit because they didn't want to waste bullets. Rape and torture, survivors of torture, survivors of rape. A woman who tells a story about how they raped her while her child was crying, and she kept on begging them not to to harm the child, that she'll give up to them. And once they'd finished with her, they bought the head of the child. So the stories were almost unbelievable. And it slowly but surely started to spread that there is a massacre of Muslims taking place. Of course, there was also other fighting taking place, which we didn't fully understand, between the Serbs and the Croats. Sometimes the Croats joined alongside the Muslims, and other times they were fighting the Muslims. But as I said before, there was no one supporting the Muslims. There was no physical corridor they were connected to any other place. The Bosnian Croats had Croatia, the Bosnian Serbs had Serbia. And so some friends of mine, and before this happened, actually, my first interaction was with Bosnians properly was when refugees came to Birmingham Central Mosque. And I remember looking at them, seeing them, thinking they look like Irish laborers. I couldn't see any visible imagery of Islam on them, not that I was particularly visibly Muslim myself at that time. And it was one of the reasons why I started practicing the faith. And then I started to sit with them and talk to them, and got very attached with many Bosnians in the UK who told me their stories. Some had bullet wounds in them, others. Once I was sitting and talking to this brother who'd graduated from Sarajevo University, and he told me how they were so close with the Serbs. They saw no difference. They'd intermarry and so forth because faith wasn't a thing to them. And as he's talking to me, I didn't realize, he rolls up his trouser leg and he pulls off his leg. He has a prosthetic leg. And we continue talking. And I'm just a young man at this time, in my early 20s. We continue to talk. He talks about how he graduated and so forth. And then he pulls off his other leg. He's a double amputee, but you would never have known it. And he said his home was mined, or the area around his home was landmined. And the people who put it there included his neighbors, who he'd known for so many years. So there was all of this type of stories coming through. And I felt that I've got to do something. And I remember at this time, I'd had a gold ring from when I was a child, when I was young, in my teen years. And one of the things that I did, it was just a small thing, but it came along I want to practice my religion. Gold is haram for men to wear. I took it off and donated it to something for Bosnia. I thought, this is, what is that? That's not doing anything for anybody. So a friend of mine then went and joined an aid convoy to Bosnia. And several months later, he came back. And then he told us a story of resistance that just had me glued.
So from then onward, after being inspired by what happened, what's your actual story of what happened in Bosnia? I know I've interviewed you before on a few different things, and you've done many interviews on your story in Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay, but I feel like this might be something that's less publicly known. Although you probably write about it in your book and there's some references to it, what's your actual story in Bosnia and what actually took place? Be as open as you want, inshallah.
So my friend who went to Bosnia and Shahid, he came back and he told us stories of some brothers from different parts of the world coming and taking part in the resistance, joining, of course, the Bosnians themselves. But because they were foreigners by necessity, they ended up banding together. And they did so under the banner of Islam, as Muslims, as Mujahideen. So that itself was deeply inspirational. And there were no videos, there were very few. There were some videos coming out, but not detailed like they are nowadays, of every single thing. And when he came back, it would, you'd have to rely on storytellers. And he's telling a story of this is what happened, that was happened. We crossed this lake and this mountain and we dressed like this and we came across this force and this is how we used to sleep at night. And we'd sit around fires singing an asheed, reciting Quran at night, praying tahajjud. All of this sort of stuff was the types of stuff I'd started to read about what had happened in Afghanistan before. But now this is a practical thing. And it's, you can be in Bosnia. If you drive within 24 hours, 48 hours, you can be there if there's no stops. You can be there quick. It's a 1,500, 1,400 mile journey. And that's what I did. I took, along with others, I went on aid convoys to Bosnia several times, not just once. In fact, so many times I can't remember how many times I went. In the first or the second time I think I went there, or the first, I did work at an aid station in a particular city in Ostrovets, near Ljubljanica. Came across horror stories, saw the graveyards filled with new, freshly dug graves. My heart was, always beating, driving through parts of the cities, through Mostar is where we first entered, being shown images and places where I remember one of the brothers who took us in, he pointed to this cross on a monastery. And he said, this is where they crucified one of the foreign Mujahideen. And you remember, I'm a young man. I've never been in a war zone per se like this before. And it's all coming through. Sometimes we're going through checkpoints that are controlled by the Croats, and the Croat Muslim coalition sometimes used to break apart. So the presence of us would be problematic. So he'd tell us to hide in the back. And all of that would happen. I remember coming across this young, I thought he's a mujahid, he's a warrior, he's fighting, he's in military gear, he wants a lift, he's a Bosnian, we take him to wherever he's going, but he's drunk. And that's how it is, that's how it was in Bosnia at that time. Being drunk, being a Muslim, fighting, doing jihad, there was no contradiction in it. So I met with Bosnian forces, what I regard probably the most Islamic Bosnian forces under this guy called Mudadris, who had trained and studied in Egypt. So he was teaching them their religion as well as fighting back. And the religious aspect to the fight back it can't be overstated, because the concept then of jihad, of struggle, of Mujahideen was extremely important. And it helped to build the resilience of the Bosnians. Bosnians weren't necessarily a fighting people at that time, not at least compared to the Chechens or the Afghans. But what they did do is put up a resistance, remember the heavy weaponry of the army of Yugoslavia, the Yugoslavian army, was all in the hands of the Serbs. So the helicopters, the aircraft, the tanks, all of the heavy firepower, they had all of it. And what these guys had was smaller weapons, light weapons, maybe even medium weapons, but nothing heavy, no air power. And that's why one of the things that they said, the United Nations and so forth, NATO, is that they put a block on, they put a no-fly zone. Nobody can fly over there. Well, the Serbs could fly. They could fly in the helicopters, and the Muslims didn't even have anti-aircraft capabilities. So they got pounded from everywhere. The other thing was places like Sarajevo. The Serbs took the hills all around. And Sarajevo is a place where the hills surround the city. And they would literally snipe people going to the market, to the shops, mortar shell them. So there were massacres taking place at different parts of the country. And the Muslims were on the back foot. The difference was when the foreigners came, they made lots of videos, they made lots of stories about the bravery of the foreigners. And whilst that can't be taken away, it in a sense diminished the bravery of the Bosnians. And the Bosnian bravery was this, is that you guys can come from abroad, you can stay, you can fight, many got married and stay there. But you've always got a home to go back to that will be safe. We don't. We've got to live here. And tomorrow, these people we're fighting, they're going to be our neighbors. And that was the difference. So that's a different kind of bravery that wasn't really celebrated by the foreigners. And we could mention many, many names of foreign leaders, of Kuwaitis, of Saudis, of Egyptians and beyond, who become kind of immortalized in the imagery in the videos of those Mujahideen, some who lived and some who were shaheed. But very rarely can you remember the name of Bosnians.
Can you continue to tell us more about your time there and the things that you got up to, and perhaps some human stories as well from the ground?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's several stories. I joined the known as the Armia Bosanska, the Third Corpus, which was essentially the foreign Mujahideen units that was based in Zenica. I wasn't there for a very long time. I didn't spend a great deal amount of time there. I did spend time back and forth many times. I did do lots of trips. In the period I was there, it was the kind of height of winter, so there wasn't much action, physical action going on. I did spend some time at the sort of second bases, first bases, but there was no, at my point, there was no physical attacks taking place, just guarding the borders. But I did go to see, I remember going to the hospital and seeing the brother from the UK, and he'd been wounded. His eye was shot out. He's a Black Revert brother, I think from Reading or somewhere. I remember walking in, seeing him, and then around him, several brothers, Bosnians and foreigners, with their legs missing because they'd stepped on landmines. And I remember around that time, Princess Diana had just been to Bosnia and come back and done this campaign against landmines, and she'd walked into minefields with her campaign about the effects of mines. So actually seeing brothers with their legs missing, you know, many years later on, I would see a brother walk into a landmine. I would walk into a landmine field with him, and I saw his leg blown off right in front of me. And it is one of the most frightening things a person can see, because you don't know where to take the next step. But seeing people in that state, and then particularly this brother from Reading, who said, this path is not easy. By definition, it will be loss of life, loss of freedom, loss of body parts, loss of wealth, loss of, as we would later learn, even status. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and beyond, the status of Ahl al-Badr cannot be matched. They fought and they gave their lives, or potentially were prepared to give their lives. And the Prophet ﷺ said nothing will harm them after what they've done this day, not even in the hereafter. And of course, later, and this is really true of the Bosnian conflict, even though there was no concept of connecting Muslims involved in defending the Bosnians who were facing, let's be clear, it was the biggest genocide in Europe after the Holocaust. It happened to Europe's Muslims. But despite coming into their defense, it's very rare that you'll hear people tell this story about Bosnia because of the fear of being labeled a terrorist or terrorist sympathizer or supporter, even though the concept was never applied to the Bosnians or the Bosnian Mujahideen. So that, for me, became a really, really important part. My next role then continued in bringing supplies back and forth from the UK to Bosnia. Food, medical aid, blankets, people, doctors, specialists, engineers, anybody who could help to build the country, to help to support the brothers defending. And I continued to do that all the way until 1997, which was the last time I went to Bosnia. I did return last year. I went on a flight to Bosnia, take a group of young professionals from the UK, and for them to experience my return after 30 odd years to this place. But as we all disembarked and I came to the immigration, everybody was let through except me and another brother. And when I told them this is my return trip after 30 years, they said, we know, and we thank you for everything that you did for our country, but you're not allowed in.
What was the UK government's response at the time
in regards to people going over there for aid or for foreign fighting. I know now, for example, if there's a conflict that breaks out and Muslims want to defend other Muslims or defend other people, there's a problem. Whereas when it comes to Ukraine and other places or Libya, there's not a problem. Because from my perspective, it's something that you have to do in secret, something that you have to be willing to kind of give up your passport for almost. What was the situation like then and contrasting it to today?
It's a really good question because now it's the question of foreign fighters. And I think that's an extremely important question. And I don't think I have the same view as I used to have many years ago. And that's because experience teaches people certain things. So let me just address the part about what the UK government was, how they viewed this at the time of people going over. I remember when I was going through the border, I told them straight, I'm going to go and help the Bosnians. I'm going to go and join the Bosnian army. And it wasn't illegal. And there was no concept that any of them are regarded as terrorist entities. I remember that we stopped at in Croatia, there was many of the United Nations forces who were, peacekeepers. In fact, they were watching what was taking place, heavily armed and doing nothing. And they included Pakistanis, Turks, Belgians, Bangladeshis, British, Norwegians. Infamously, it was the Dutch United Nations forces who told the Bosnians to come to Srebrenica and take refuge. And of course, they were left to it, and the genocide occurred by Ratko Mladic, killing them all. But I spoke to the Pakistanis. I think we stayed with the Pakistanis once. And they expressed their deep frustration as ordinary soldiers of sitting and watching, knowing that there's rape camps in Bosnia of Muslim women where they want to impregnate the next generation of Serbs. We met with the British. I remember speaking to the British there, and they too they didn't understand what their mission was when they knew that there's one side committing a genocide and the other side is just taking it. But nobody saw the presence of foreigners as terrorism. There were things that were problematic, of course, because people came with particular ideas, religious ideas, and harsh religious ideas, and untested, and started to apply them onto Bosnians who had just about started to learn what Al-Fatiha meant. And you could go to places in central Zenica in Ramadan. The mosques would be pretty full, but then so would the bars and the nightclubs. And that's what you'd have to deal with. So anybody with an understanding of Islam that's very, very strict and stern and with no room for a gradual understanding or implementation started to have big problems with the locals. As far as the British were concerned, they did recognize after many years, and the Americans intervened, and they did start to bomb the Serbs, but it was after over 100,000 Muslims were killed, and after 50,000 Muslim women were raped. So it's important we understand that. And the Organization of Islamic Conference had threatened, I remember one of the years, that if nothing is done by January the 1st, we will all respond in unison. They simply didn't say which year, and we're still waiting for that response. The few countries that did do anything, one of them was Iran. And of course, there was a very strong anti-Shiite sentiment in all those who had come from different parts of the Arab world, including especially the Gulf and Saudi Arabia. So I remember a terrible thing that happened in my last visit to Bosnia, really terrible. There was a brother I knew, he was an Egyptian, and I said to him, I drove an ambulance to Bosnia, this was my last trip in 1997, that I will meet you at this particular place outside this aid center in Zenica. And so he was waiting there for me. I arrived with two Bosnian brothers in this ambulance that I'm driving, and there's police cars everywhere. I get out of the car, the Bosnian police come and take me, as well as anybody that looked like a foreigner. I see the brother's car being towed away, the brother who's waiting for me. And then I learned that he's been shot dead. And he was shot dead, I learned, by somebody who came to him and said, "You work with the Iranians. You are a Shia supporter." And then he said, you must curse the Sahaba if you're a Shia supporter. He said, Wallahi, I only praise the Sahaba, He said it 3 times because a witness mentioned it. I only praise the Sahaba, and then bang, bang, bang. He killed him. And it was a Tunisian who killed an Egyptian in Bosnia. And that was the last time I left that country, and I never went back.
What are the lessons that we can learn today when it comes to the Bosnian war, what happened in the 90s? And also, just to add to that as a final question, what's the important legacy, especially for the next generation, considering we're 30 years on, the people who have stories won't be around for longer, and obviously these are stories that need to be told and need to be kept, but what's the reason more so for the next generation of Muslims growing up in the West to be aware about what happened in Bosnia?
I think first of all, on the wider scale, we've got to recognize that here was a Muslim majority, at least area, if not a complete country. And it was in the heart of Europe. And historically speaking, this was the frontier of the Ottoman Khilafah. This was the frontier. After that, it was pure hostility. And so they kept it up until communism. And even when communism came, they held the names. The religion was far gone from them now, and there's been a revival. So one of the results of the presence of foreigners in Bosnia was a revival of Islam, and it's got to be recognized for what it is. But there is another problem, and we've seen that if you want to take a lesson of Bosnia, and I see one of the lessons of Bosnia in relation to, say, what happened in Syria, is in Bosnia you had limited numbers of foreigners coming. They were under the Bosnian army. They were had given their allegiance to it and remained so. But then there were other splits in there. And when those splits happened, it's happened because, if you give your allegiance to the Bosnian army, you are a disbeliever. Because the Bosnian army is run, and Bosnia is run by Ali Izetbegovic, who may be a quote-unquote Islami, may have spent decades in prison for his writings of Islam, but he's not implementing Sharia immediately, therefore he is a disbeliever. And you fighting under their army, you also become a disbeliever. And this is a toxic brew that rears its ugly head every now and then. And it happened in Syria en masse, where you had people fighting for the sake of Allah, defending themselves from a brutal enemy who was, again, raping and torturing the Islamic opposition, imprisoning them at best and murdering them at worst. A group emerges that says, because you're not establishing a caliphate, because you are not under our vision of the caliphate, because you are not implementing Sharia in its fullest and the hudud in its fullest, you are also kuffar, disbelievers, and killing you is more important than killing the enemy. And that's exactly what's happened in Syria. And you can see the results of that was far worse than Bosnia. Not only that, you had women come along and then became not only slaves because they decided to enslave other people's women, but also now are in camps by tens of thousands, and they're still there. So that's one of the lessons. And my other thing, it's really important about the presence of foreigners, whichever conflict it happens to be in, wherever it happens to be, that it must be deeply, deeply regulated. I think in Syria they had this policy of anybody can come. In Bosnia they did to some degree, but they still had to go under the auspices of the army. But the presence of foreigners has to be regulated. Anything else is a disaster.
And the last question about for the next generation, especially particularly because we're in the UK, the next generation, why is it important for them to know the actual story of what happened in Bosnia?
So if you ask a question, I went to this college not too long ago, and I asked a question for students, about 150 students there, Muslim, non-Muslim, and so forth. How many of you have heard of the Holocaust? Everybody put their hands up. I asked then, how many of you have heard of the massacres in Bosnia and Srebrenica and Kurajta, of the genocide there? About 5 hands went up. about 5. And then I asked them, how many of you have heard of the prison camp in Guantanamo? And about another 5 there. So I said, think about this, guys. You know about something that happened over 100 years ago, not 100, about 80 years ago. Your parents weren't even alive when it happened, let alone your grandparents. And it didn't happen here in the UK. It happened in Europe. Yet, you know about it intimately. Why is that? You're not Jewish. You were not involved in what took place. Your parents were not involved in what took place. Why do you need to know it? And I'm telling you now something that happened in your lifetime, perhaps when you were born. It happened on the year that you were born, 94, 95. And you know nothing of it. And it too is a genocide. I mean, it was historically speaking much closer. So why don't you know? And the teachers all started to ask themselves, why don't they know? I said, I'm not telling you you shouldn't know about the Holocaust, but you should know what happened historically speaking much closer to us. And so it's important. The few hands that did go up for Bosnia and for Guantanamo were Muslim hands. They knew it to some degree. And that's important because other people will write their histories and make sure the whole world knows about their history and what was done. And you can see those who don't, those who haven't been able to write their history, they've paid a massive price. Take a look at the Aboriginals of Australia, wiped out, almost nothing left of their culture. Now they celebrate it as if it's, this was always part of Australia. No, it wasn't. It was, you subjugated them to the point of almost annihilation. The Native Americans is saying that the original people or the First Nations of Canada exactly the same, relegated. This is really important for us now, especially at a time when Palestine is happening. It's quite possible that the Palestinian people in that land disappear. It's happening, and it will happen in front of us. And there's an open intention of ethnic cleansing and genocide taking place, of settling those lands. They're not even pretending. And we may be the weakest we've ever been in our history, but at least we know our history. What happens when we don't know our history? What happens if these genocides happen and we simply don't know? So if it happens now, we say, well, that's the first time, it's not so bad. But it's recurred. It's happened again. There are areas in Bosnia to this day that were ethnically cleansed and are now only Serbs living there. Literally, where they wiped out the population, pushed them out or killed them, and there's no more Muslims there. So that's why it's so important.
So there we have it. That's the end of this episode. I'd like to thank you for staying tuned so far, and I'd like to thank my guests. Next up, I speak to one of the most known UK Muslims who was active during the Bosnian War, and I must say, he has a lot to offer. So get ready for the next episode, and I'll see you in episode 5.